Our universe, a tapestry of infinite stars and swirling nebulae, was governed by a profound, unwavering principle: order. This order was meticulously maintained by the Zenith Concord, a sprawling alliance of ancient, impossibly logical alien races. For eons, their civilizations thrived on perfect calculations, flawless algorithms, and absolute predictability. Every decision, from the placement of a new star system to the color of a diplomatic envoy's uniform, was rooted in pure, unadulterated reason. And their justice system? It was the purest embodiment of this logical perfection. Imagine a courtroom, vast and imposing, bathed in sterile, cool light. Towering holographic displays flickered with endless streams of data, graphs, and probability matrices. There were no emotional outbursts here. No impassioned pleas for mercy. Justice in the Concord was a precise equation. Guilt or innocence was determined by cold, hard facts, quantifiable data, and unshakable precedents. Feelings, intuition, intent, these were variables that simply did not compute. The chamber was filled with silent alien observers, their forms rigid, their thoughts purely objective. They processed the trial like a complex mathematical problem, awaiting the inevitable, logical solution. At the very heart of this system sat Judge Xylos, an ancient being whose form was a complex arrangement of shimmering crystalline plates, devoid of any discernible facial features. Judge Xylos was the living, breathing embodiment of Concord justice. Its voice, broadcast telepathically to every corner of the vast courtroom, was flat, utterly devoid of inflection, and spoke in precise, data-driven pronouncements. Case number 734. Gamma 9. Accusation. Destructive intent. Defendant. Cathar designation Zorg. Judge Xylos had presided over thousands of cases, each resolved with predictable, cold precision. It had never encountered an illogical case, nor had it ever been moved by anything resembling an emotion. To Judge Xylos, justice was simply the correct output for a given set of inputs. The defendant, Cathar Zorg, was brought forward. He was a truly intimidating sight. A massive, bipedal alien, easily twice the height of most humans, with tough, ridged skin, the color of deep space, and 4 powerful limbs. His species, the Cathar, were known throughout the galaxy for their aggressive tendencies, their blunt communication, and their general disinterest in diplomacy. They were a race of warriors, whose history was filled with conquests and raw power. This reputation, this data, immediately painted Cathar Zorg as guilty by association in the eyes of the Concord. He was exactly the type of being their algorithms predicted would commit such a crime. Yet, as he stood before the immense crystalline form of Judge Xylos, Cathar Zorg didn't look like a ruthless destroyer. He looked bewildered. His large, dark eyes darted around the cold, unfamiliar chamber, clearly reflecting confusion, perhaps even a hint of fear. He emitted low, guttural sounds, which the Concord's translators rendered simply as unknown vocalizations, dismissing them as irrelevant. The crime was presented with cold, meticulous detail. The alleged destruction of a peaceful trade outpost known for its rare interstellar spices. A holographic recreation of the incident unfolded before the court. It showed explosions, collapsing structures, and general devastation. The evidence presented was purely logical, circumstantial, and pointed directly to Zorg. Sensor logs from automated defense systems, analysis of energy signatures matching Cathar weapon profiles, and trajectory calculations all aligned perfectly. It was an airtight case, built on numbers and undeniable facts. Then came the testimony of the accuser, a being named Zephyr. Zephyr was a small, elegant alien from a race known for their eloquence and precise articulation. His form was delicate, almost ethereal, shimmering with soft, pastel colors. Zephyr floated effortlessly into the witness stand, his voice a melodic hum, yet every word was razor-sharp and perfectly logical. He described the incident with chilling detail, weaving a perfectly linear narrative of Cathar Zorg's ruthless actions. The defendant, Zephyr's voice resonated through the court, approached with hostile intent. His ship's signature matched weapon activation. The destruction followed. Logically, the defendant is responsible. Zephyr's testimony was a masterpiece of logical deduction, painting Zorg as a ruthless, unfeeling destroyer. Every point was backed by data, Every statement flowed perfectly from the last. It seemed utterly airtight. The Concord observers processed the information, their internal systems confirming the logical consistency of Zephyr's account. To them, there was no room for doubt. The data was clear. The logical conclusion was unavoidable. Cathar Zorg's historical aggression, combined with the irrefutable data presented, left no room for alternative interpretations. No alien race was willing to step forward to defend a Cathar, especially one accused of such a blatant violation of Concord peace. They simply saw him as a predictable threat, now caught in the act. Judge Xylos, its crystalline form glowing with the certainty of absolute truth, prepared to issue a swift, predictable guilty verdict. Its internal processors had already calculated the appropriate sentence based on countless precedents. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. The cold, impartial hand of galactic justice was about to descend, swift and absolute. But then, a voice, vibrant and utterly unexpected, cut through the sterile silence. A voice filled with something alien to this court. Indignation. The unpredictable intervention. The crystalline plates of Judge Xylos began to glow, signifying the imminent delivery of a verdict. The silent, logical observers of the Concord watched, their sensors primed to record the final, predictable outcome. Cathar Zorg, still looking less like a menace and more like a lost pet, simply braced himself. The cold hand of galactic justice was about to descend, swift and absolute, when a voice, vibrant and utterly unexpected, cut through the sterile silence. A voice filled with something alien to this court, indignation, and a hint of cheerful defiance. Objection! The single word rang out, startling several Lumini observers into flickering wildly. It was Ambassador Kira, standing abruptly from the human observation deck. Her posture was relaxed, almost too casual for the solemnity of the court, yet her eyes blazed with a fierce conviction. "Your Honor," she continued, her voice echoing with a warmth that felt almost illegal in the frigid courtroom. "This court is about to render judgment without proper due process. The defendant has not been truly heard. He's been judged by his species' history, not his actions, and certainly not his intent." Judge Xylos paused, its glowing plates dimming slightly as it processed this unprecedented interruption. "Ambassador Kira," its telepathic voice resonated, flat and unfeeling. "The data is conclusive. The defendant's species has a statistically significant predisposition to aggression. His ship's signature matches the destructive event. Logic dictates guilt." "Logic," Kira countered, stepping forward, "doesn't always see the whole picture. Humans have a saying, don't judge a book by its cover. And in this galaxy, you're judging a whole species by a single data point." She swept an arm out, gesturing towards the bewildered Cathar Zorg. "This isn't justice. This is a calculation, and calculations can be flawed if you don't input all the variables." A low murmur, surprisingly loud for a Concord court, rippled through the alien observers. They tried to process due process and judging a book by its cover, concepts entirely foreign to their data-driven legal system. A Krylax delegate tried to enter book cover judgment into its datapad, only to receive an immediate error, no empirical data. Kira took a deep breath, her gaze firm. "Therefore, Your Honor, we formally request the right to present a defense. And for that, I introduce you to the finest legal mind from Earth, Elias Vance." A ripple of confusion spread through the courtroom. "A human lawyer?" Elder Vorlog's multiple eyes widened in alarm. Illumini Ambassador's light flickered anxiously, anticipating illogical chaos. From the human delegation section, Elias Vance stepped forward. He was a striking contrast to the sterile environment. His dark suit, though immaculately tailored, seemed a bit too informal for the Concord's rigid standards. He wasn't imposing like the Kaler, nor ethereal like the Lumini. He was just human. A bit rumpled around the edges, with a cheerful, almost mischievous twinkle in his eye. He advanced to the defense podium, not with solemn steps, but with a confident, almost bouncy stride. He stopped, looked around the vast, silent courtroom, and then, with a wide, disarming smile, he spoke. "Good morning, galactic dignitaries. Lovely weather for a trial, isn't it? Though I admit, these crystalline walls could use a little more pop of color. Perhaps some nice ambient lighting? Just a thought." Silence. Complete, utter, baffled silence. The alien observers struggled to process this opening. Weather for a trial? Pop of color? Ambient lighting? These were entirely irrelevant variables to a judicial proceeding. Vorlags attempted to categorize Elias's unnecessary vocalizations and, quote, unquantifiable aesthetic opinions. Lumini tried to calculate the logical purpose of his smile, their light pulsing rapidly, unable to find a coherent output. Judge Xylos, for the first time in its existence, seemed to hesitate. Your arguments, its telepathic voice finally stated, lack empirical data. Your opening statement is illogical. Its relevance is unquantifiable. This proceeding is for justice, not interior design recommendations. Elias just chuckled, a warm, resonant sound that made several Krylax delegates twitch. Ah, Judge Xylos, you hit the nail on the head. Or perhaps you're looking at the wrong nail. My arguments will lack empirical data. My purpose here isn't to present facts that your systems already see. It's to present the truth that your systems cannot see. Because, Your Honor, truth isn't always logical. Sometimes, truth is messy. Sometimes, it's emotional. And sometimes, it's just plain unfair. We're here to talk about empathy, about intent, about misunderstanding, and about the very unique, often illogical, beating heart of human justice. He paused, letting his words hang in the air, creating a truly alien sensation in the perfectly ordered courtroom. Then, he looked directly at the bewildered Karn Zorg, and for the first time, a human offered a small, reassuring smile to a defendant in a Concord court. Zorg, for his part, just blinked, still utterly confused, but perhaps, just perhaps, a tiny bit less alone. This was a clash of titans, cold, hard logic versus the wild, unpredictable heart of humanity. The trial was about to take a very strange, very human turn, and the Concord was utterly unprepared. The unraveling of logic. Human style. The immense, sterile courtroom of the Zenith Concord hummed with an unfamiliar tension. Judge Xylos, its crystalline form, radiating a faint, almost imperceptible aura of processing overload, awaited the human's next move. Elias Vance stood at the defense podium, a casual smile playing on his lips, utterly undaunted by the silent, judging gazes of the galaxy's most logical beings. He had promised to present a truth their systems couldn't see, and now, he was about to deliver. Your Honor, Elias began, his voice calm yet resonating with an undercurrent of something the aliens couldn't quite identify. Perhaps amusement. The esteemed Zephyr has painted a picture of cold, calculated aggression. A logical, precise destruction. But I believe, with all due respect, that Zephyr's brushstrokes, while technically perfect, missed a few human nuances, or rather, Cathar nuances. He turned to the holographic projection of Zephyr, who floated serenely in the witness stand, confident in his meticulously crafted testimony. Zephyr, Elias continued, his tone shifting, you testified that the defendant, Cathar Zorg, approached with hostile intent. How did you deduce this intent? Was it a precise energy signature? A known aggression marker in the Cathar physiological readout? Zephyr's melodic voice responded, it was a logical conclusion, based on historical Cathar engagement patterns and the defendant's ship trajectory. Ah, trajectory. Elias nodded, walking slowly around the podium. Fascinating. So if I were to, say, attempt to retrieve a lost datapad that had fallen under a large, immovable object, and my trajectory involved me awkwardly crawling, then perhaps stumbling, then maybe accidentally bumping into said object while emitting a frustrated grunt, would your system interpret that as hostile intent towards the datapad? The courtroom was silent. Lumini observers pulsed with a frantic, stuttering light. Krylax delegates tried to calculate the probability of a datapad being attacked by a grunt. Judge Xylos remained still, but its internal hum seemed to waver. Ambassador Vance, Judge Xylos interjected, your analogy lacks logical parallel. A datapad is not a sentient being. A grunt is not a weapon signature. Precisely, Your Honor, Elias beamed. And that's where we humans, with our beautifully messy brains, find the truth. We don't just see the trajectory. We see the frustration. We see the awkwardness. We see the difference between attack and, quote, accidentally tripping with malicious intent towards gravity. He paused, letting the sheer absurdity of his statement hang in the air. Several Vorlags attempted to categorize gravity-based malice, and their internal processors reported error, no data. Elias then shifted his focus back to Zephyr, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more conversational, almost friendly. Zephyr, you described the destruction of the trade outpost. A terrible event. You mentioned the defendant's ship firing energy. Can you describe in detail your emotional state during this terrifying event? Zephyr paused. Emotional state is irrelevant to factual testimony, Ambassador. My data collection was optimal. Of course, optimal, Elias agreed cheerfully. But just for a moment, let's step away from optimal. Let's talk about stress. When you were witnessing this incident, did you feel a tightness in perhaps your respiratory organs? A slight tremor in your vocal modulator? Any jitters? Zephyr's ethereal form seemed to stiffen almost imperceptibly. My physiology maintains equilibrium under all conditions. My report was consistent. Consistent, yes, Elias countered, moving closer, his voice still soft. But perhaps too consistent? You see, Zephyr, humans have these things called tells. Tiny, almost invisible signals our bodies give off when we're, well, let's say, not being entirely straightforward. A slight tremor in the eye when under pressure. A subtle shift in vocal tone, perhaps a fraction higher than normal, when telling a difficult truth, or a well-rehearsed lie. As Elias spoke, he subtly adjusted his own tie, then scratched his chin, then looked away, then back at Zephyr. These were common human gestures, but they were designed to create discomfort. Zephyr's shimmering form flickered, just barely. A faint, almost imperceptible wave of pastel green passed over his usually serene blue. The Lumini observer's light pulses, usually perfectly uniform, began to show tiny, almost random variations. Their systems couldn't log Zephyr's nervousness, but they could log the change in his light signature. Is that green a color of contemplation, Zephyr? Or perhaps discomfort? Elias asked mildly, his eyes boring into Zephyr's form. He was not looking for a logical answer. He was probing for an emotional crack. Zephyr's voice grew fractionally sharper. My colors reflect optimal atmospheric conditions. Your line of questioning is irrelevant, and based on unquantifiable variables. Unquantifiable, perhaps, for your species, Elias mused, turning slightly to the Concord Council. But for humans? A nervous flicker, a slight pitch change in the voice, an involuntary twitch of a minor appendage. These are all crucial pieces of evidence. They tell us about intent, about truthfulness, about the hidden currents beneath the logical surface. He gestured to a large Vorlog observer. It's like trying to deduce if that Vorlog is happy by only analyzing its internal organ function. You might miss the fact that it's quietly humming a little tune that we recognize as a happy hum. The Vorlag, in question, emitted a confused, startled squawk, its tentacles briefly intertwining. Elias then called for his next piece of evidence. Your Honor, I submit Exhibit A, human-interpreted visual data. A grainy, chaotic video of the incident at the trade outpost flashed on the main holographic screen. To the Concord, it simply confirmed Zephyr's testimony. Zorg's ship approaching, an energy burst, then destruction. But Elias had a different view. Concord systems, Elias explained, analyze energy signatures and trajectories. And they are correct, data-wise. But human eyes, combined with human experience, see something more. Something messier. He zoomed in on a specific frame, showing Zorg's ship just before the energy burst. Notice the slight shudder here. Not a hostile maneuver. This, Your Honor, is the signature of a malfunctioning stabilization system. He played a slowed-down segment. Now, observe the energy burst. The Concord sees a weapon fire. But look closer. This isn't a focused weapon discharge. This is an uncontrolled energy surge. The kind you get when a desperate individual, facing a rapidly failing ship, tries a last-ditch, experimental repair on the fly, hoping to avoid a collision. Then came the truly fun part. And now, for the intent, Elias declared dramatically. He showed another angle, a chaotic, shaky feed from the outpost itself, just before the explosion. Zorg's ship was visible, swerving erratically. In a brief, blurry frame, a massive Cathar hand could be seen in the ship's viewport, making a motion. The Concord systems registered it as a power surge command. This is Kfar sign language for fire at will, Zephyr's melodic voice cut in, confident. Ah, but is it? Elias countered, a mischievous glint in his eye. Your Honor, I call my next witness to explain true Cathar communication, and a common Cathar oopsie gesture. Expert witness, Professor Xylor. A slightly stooped Cathar scholar, wearing thick spectacles and looking immensely uncomfortable, shuffled into the witness stand. The gesture, Professor Xylor rumbled, is commonly interpreted as fire at will, if you are observing from a great distance and lacking cultural context. However, he cleared his throat, if you are, say, attempting to swat an irritating spacefly that has entered your cockpit, while also accidentally leaning on a weapon activation panel, then that gesture would be more accurately translated as, "Arg! Pesky bug! Oh, blazes, no!" The courtroom was in uproar. Not a logical uproar, but a human one. Several human observers burst into laughter. The aliens, however, were once again in system overload. A Lumini observer short-circuited entirely and began projecting images of kittens. Judge Xylos's crystalline plates began to emit faint steam. "So, Your Honor," Elias concluded, pulling out a rubber chicken and holding it up. "Is it a weapon of terror or a tool for stress relief? Context, Your Honor? Intent. And sometimes, just plain clumsiness." The defendant was not attacking. He was having a really bad day, trying to swat a bug, and accidentally caused an unprecedented galactic incident. He was trying to prevent a crash, not cause a destruction. The courtroom, for the first time, felt less like a sterile calculation and more like a messy, unpredictable, hilarious disaster. Elias Vance had shattered their logical framework, not with counter-evidence, but with the sheer, delightful absurdity of human truth. The Concorde was completely out of its depth. And Cathar Zorg, for the first time, saw a flicker of understanding in human eyes, eyes that saw him not just as data, but as a bewildered, bug-swatting individual. The verdict of empathy. A profound silence descended upon the vast, crystalline courtroom, heavier than any silence the Concorde had ever experienced. It wasn't the usual data-driven quiet. It was a silence filled with the echoes of Elias Vance's emotional plea, the ghost of a rubber chicken, and the unsettling truth of Zephyr's manipulative deceit. Judge Xylos, usually a beacon of unwavering logic, was now a nexus of conflicting data. Its central crystal pulsed erratically, its internal hum rising and falling like a hesitant breath. All logical data pointed to Cathar Zorg's guilt, yet Elias Vance's illogical arguments had created a, quote, data quote, that the judge's ancient processors simply could not resolve. The system was overloaded with unquantifiable variables, like empathy, intent, and the sheer audacity of blaming a spacefly. The Lumini observers, usually radiating a calm uniform light, now flickered with a myriad of confused colors, some even emitting faint, unidentifiable beeps. The Krylax delegates, masters of order, found their internal clocks wildly out of sync, their precision mechanisms twitching with an unprecedented form of anxiety. Elder Vorlag, his multifaceted eyes wide, found his tentacles tying themselves into complex, illogical knots, a physical manifestation of his internal turmoil. His species, built on meticulous analysis, was faced with a paradox. The logical conclusion was wrong because the human truth was different. Judge Xylos's form remained still for what felt like an eternity. The hum grew louder, then abruptly ceased, plunging the courtroom into an even deeper, almost deafening quiet. On its vast holographic displays, instead of data streams, strange, colorful images flickered. A human child laughing, a dog chasing its tail, a field of wildflowers. Its internal systems were trying to make sense of the new, illogical inputs, desperately searching for a pattern in the chaos Elias had introduced. It was trying to compute the uncomputable. Finally, with a soft, resonant chime, Judge Xylos spoke. Its telepathic voice, for the first time, seemed to carry a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in its flat tone. There was no emotion, but there was something akin to profound reevaluation. The court, Judge Xylos began, has processed the presented data. The logical conclusion, based solely on quantifiable metrics, indicates guilt. However, the defense has introduced unquantifiable ambiguities. The concept of intent, the presence of emotional distress, and the demonstration of illogical motive from the accuser, previously deemed irrelevant, have created a data anomaly that cannot be resolved through existing logical frameworks. A collective silent gasp rippled through the non-human observers. Therefore, Judge Xylos continued, its voice regaining a touch of its usual authority, but now infused with a new, strange weight. Due to the introduction of these unpredictable variables, which prevent a logical and certain conclusion of guilt, this court finds Qatar Zorg not guilty. The words hung in the air, a seismic shockwave through the Concorde's legal bedrock. Not guilty. A verdict based not on clear logical innocence, but on the impossibility of logical certainty due to human-introduced variables. It was a revolution hidden in a technicality. Qatar Zorg's reaction was immediate and profound. His immense form, which had been rigid with fear, suddenly sagged. He let out a strange guttural sound, not of aggression but of immense, overwhelming relief. His mottled gray skin burst into a riot of vibrant, swirling greens and blues, a Cathar-style emotional outpouring. He pounded one of his massive fists gently on the witness stand, a gesture of thanks that would have once been misinterpreted as aggressive, but now the human observers understood it as pure, unadulterated joy. He looked at Elias Vance, and for a long moment simply stared, before giving a surprisingly gentle, if slightly bone-jarring Cathar high five to a very delighted Elias. Zephyr, the accuser, was utterly exposed. His seemingly innocent form pulsed with furious, aggressive reds and blacks. His melodious voice twisted into a guttural snarl, echoing his earlier outburst. "This is illogical. He was a predictable variable. My plan was perfect." His logical facade finally crumbled, revealing the chilling, manipulative, and ultimately selfish logic beneath. The Concorde's systems, now primed by Elias's revelations, fully registered the extent of Zephyr's hidden, destructive motive, and its own internal flaws in not detecting it earlier. Zephyr was swiftly apprehended, his logical crime now fully understood by the very system he tried to exploit. The ruling sent shockwaves throughout the entire Zenith Concorde. It was the first time emotion, empathy, and human-style evidence had not only influenced a galactic court, but had actually changed its outcome. News spread like wildfire across the cosmos. The human justice miracle, they called it. The Concorde's justice system began a profound, if slow, adaptation. They established a human insight division, dedicated to reviewing complex cases, especially those involving species with unpredictable, emotional variables. New legal frameworks were hesitantly developed to include, intent, empathy, and contextual analysis as legitimate if still unquantifiable factors. It was a messy process, full of bewildered alien lawyers trying to understand human gut feelings and reading between the lines. Elias Vance became a legend overnight, known throughout the galaxy as the Maverick Mind, who reshaped galactic law. He was no longer just a human lawyer, he was a cosmic consultant, called upon to advise on the most bizarre and inexplicable cases across 1,000 star systems. He started holding emotional argument seminars, where Krylax tried to express frustration by rearranging their datapads into abstract sculptures, and Lumini attempted to convey joy through erratic, sparkling light shows. He even convinced Judge Xylos to allow a small, tastefully placed rubber chicken on the court bench during particularly complex cases, as a reminder of, unquantifiable ambiguity. Ambassador Kira beamed with pride. Humans were no longer just the crazy factor, they were the compassionate factor, the unpredictable solution. Their unique blend of logic and emotion, of chaos and creativity, had proven to be the missing piece in the galaxy's grand puzzle. She was often seen giving Elias a celebratory high five, which now, surprisingly, a few Vorlog onlookers would mimic, albeit very, very slowly, and with only one tentacle. The universe, once a bastion of cold, predictable order, had found its heart. True justice, it turned out, isn't just about cold facts, but the warm, messy, illogical, yet ultimately profound truth of living beings. The Concorde was still logical, yes, but now it was also a little more understanding, a little more empathetic, and definitely a whole lot more interesting. Because the universe had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, to find justice, you don't need a perfect algorithm. You just need a little bit of human heart, a dash of humor, and a whole lot of creative chaos to light the way. And sometimes, a very confused Cathar and a determined human lawyer are all it takes to change an entire galaxy.